Hello, welcome back to my show. Um, Immigration is in the news today. I've been taking a look at some of the things that Keir Starmer is saying the government is going to do, and some of the criticisms that the government is facing over migration. And this is something that everybody seems to get no, not everybody, a lot of people get wound up about. That immigration is too high, levels of migration are too high, and something has to be done about it. And it's such a complex issue. And I've got my own personal views, having worked at the Home Office interviewing asylum seekers. I've got some views from my time there, which is a long time ago now, actually, and I didn't work on it for very long. But all of that adds into how I feel about it. So I'm going to give you some of my own views. Maybe I'll give that first, and then I'll talk about what's happening and how the way it gets covered doesn't really help us understand the situation better. So my personal experience was interviewing asylum seekers and then deciding whether they could stay in the country or not. And in the short time that I did it, I don't know how many people I met, but sometimes I was interviewing 3 people a day. The 1951 United Nations, what's it called? Regulations relating to refugees, something like that. It governs what countries have to do when someone arrives on their shores seeking asylum. And it was set up in 1951 to try to deal with the vast number of displaced people after the Second World War. So we're talking about something that was set up a long time ago for a very specific reason and is still with us. That has to be understood, first of all. I'm not against the idea that someone could come up with something more modern, although I do worry then that people might use that opportunity to be incredibly harsh. And that comes down to my personal experience. So when you meet real people, it stops being about statistics. It stops being about whether there's too many or too few or whatever. You have a job to do as an asylum caseworker, and that job is to decide whether the person in front of you is deserving of refugee status, right? And there are criteria as to whether they are genuine refugees or not. And you can only find out by interviewing them in detail if necessary to work out what has happened to them, why they've ended up here, and whether their case is solid or not. And sometimes it was quite easy to find that somebody's story was not really a refugee story. They were here perhaps for economic reasons, and sometimes people blatantly told me that as well. You know, why have you come to the United Kingdom? I want a better life. I want to earn more money. I want to send some money back to my family. That's not a reason for giving someone refugee status. You have to show that you have been persecuted. Or you could go down the route ultimately of saying you're going to be tortured, or whatever it is. There has to be a reason why you can't go back to your country of origin. But what I want to say is that whilst the vast majority of people that I met and interviewed were refused refugee status, I can't think of anybody that I interviewed who hadn't gone through something utterly terrifying and awful. And what that means is, like any other political decision, every political decision has human beings at the end of it, flesh and blood, people with family and friends and loved ones and hopes and desires and dreams. And the rhetoric that we have about immigration loses a lot of that. And that worries me. Instead of thinking about real people, we get bogged down in statistics. So Keir Starmer says that migration will go down significantly. He's thinking about the statistics. If he's talking about asylum seekers, well, if they are genuine refugees, we have an obligation, a legal obligation in international law to help them, protect them, and let them in. If we're talking about reducing the number of people who come here illegally, the people on small boats, then there's a problem. If you say, well, we're not going to accept anybody coming in on small boats, you have to think again about that individual who's decided to come here. How do they come here legally if they're being persecuted by their own country, their own government? Their own government, if they're persecuting them, isn't likely to allow them to have a passport and help them get a visa to enter the United Kingdom legally. What option do they have other than coming on a small boat? If you get rid of the small boats, you get rid of those criminal gangs completely, but you don't set up a way to allow refugees to come here and seek safety, then you're not helping anybody, are you, ultimately? They will have to go elsewhere. And some people will say, well, that's very good, that's very nice, but then what does that mean? What kind of country are we if we slam our doors to people who need help? So there's that element to it. So there's the refugee element, asylum seekers, people on small boats, that sort of thing. And then the other element of this is people who come here to work. And that has been a lot of the focus, I think, with Keir Starmer today. I'm recording this on Monday, but it probably won't go out until Tuesday. And that is all about what sort of people you allow to come in with qualifications, and what qualifications do they have, how many do you allow to come here, and so on and so forth. Been a lot of emphasis on the care sector, a lot of emphasis on allowing people in if they've got degrees and all of that sort of thing. Yeah, that again is a tricky thing. It's basically saying there's a class element to this. Are we only saying that we don't want poor people to come? We don't want people who aren't skilled, but we need some workers that aren't skilled, don't we, to do things. So you know, there's a big debate here about what sort of work needs doing. And that seems to be the basis for deciding who gets to come in and who doesn't. And again, that has implications for real individuals as to whether they can come in and work here or not. Also has implications for whether we get the sort of work done that we want or not. And a lot of this is driven by almost an obsession with immigration. Before Brexit, but certainly after Brexit, that referendum was interpreted as a vote to kind of shut down the borders. But you can't shut down the borders. We're an island. People can turn up on small boats. People can get in. And we've also we got used to a period in the European Union where there was free movement within the boundaries of the EU. So people could come and work here, and now suddenly we've closed a lot of that off. I'm not sure that we've got better as a country since then. There's implications to all of this, and I feel as though the debate is driven not by thinking about human beings, but kind of an assumption that people coming into the country is wrong, and there's too much of it. Who says? Who's decided that? It's an interesting question. As Nigel Farage, are we all just listening to Nigel Farage a bit too much? I get the sense that Keir Starmer is. One of the Green Party leaders, Carla Denyer, has said that he's pandering to reform, Keir Starmer, pandering to reform, and it ultimately won't do him any good. And she was making the point that pandering to reform doesn't actually get Labour the reform voters back, or voters from reform aren't going to be flooding to Labour just because he's getting tough on immigration. And that leads to an interesting kind of question. What sort of country do we want? Are we going to be open to people coming here and contributing whatever they can? Or are we just going to specify that only particular people are allowed to come here? That's what Nigel Farage wants. Incidentally, he's got no problem with really very rich people coming here. It's got some interesting links to organisations that help very rich people get into the country, and so he's got an agenda that is really, when he talks about immigration, he's really talking about the boats, isn't he? And it gets mixed in with all of this stuff about whether we need people to come and work in the care sector or in hospitality, restaurants and hotels and so on. Whether we need nursing staff. It takes some of the workers that we need. We can't train here in an instant. And so what is complex gets pushed into the media as a very simplistic thing. Labour will publish their white paper and we will see what it does. But my experience on not just asylum seekers, but also immigration generally, is that you can't stop it. You can't control it. And I feel as though it would be better if politicians were honest about that and admitted that it was unstoppable, and said, instead of thinking about it as we're going to cut it down by a particular number, what we want to do is talk about what sort of country we want. And politicians then can decide, what does that mean in terms of immigration? Do we want an open country where people can come and go? People can contribute if they want to? What sort of relationship do we want with other countries around the world? Do we want to focus on some of the things that drive people away from their own countries? Things like climate change, war, famine. If we've taken money out of international aid, for goodness sake, what do we think that is going to do? So a totally different approach is needed on immigration. Not to solve the problem of immigration, because I don't think it's a problem, again, my own personal view, but a completely different reset on what our values are as a country could put us in a completely different position. And I think that's the sort of thing that the Green Party perhaps would be saying as well. I'm not a Green Party member. I just find it utterly bizarre the way that this issue is debated, and it's kind of depressing. It's kind of depressing when you think that people want to come here to work and somebody's going to say, no, you haven't got a degree, or somebody wants to come here to flee from danger, and potentially they will find that increasingly difficult to get here because there's no safe way to do it. We need to do things differently. Bye-bye.